The summer sun beat down on the crowds gathered around the Tower of London, where Royal Guard Marcus Bennett stood motionless at his post. Among the sea of tourists, nobody could have anticipated how a social media prankster's desperate bid for viral fame would transform into a moment that would teach millions about the true meaning of respect, dignity, and service. Now, before we get into it, let me know where you're watching from down in the comments. At 31, Bennett was no ordinary guardsman. 11 years of military service had sculpted not just his imposing physical presence, but a character forged in the crucible of combat. 3 tours in Iraq had taught him lessons about discipline that no training manual could capture. The small scar above his right eyebrow, barely visible beneath his bearskin cap, was a permanent reminder of the mortar attack outside Basra that had claimed 2 of his closest friends. Yet here he stood, 8 years into his service with the Royal Guards, maintaining the same unwavering composure that had kept him alive in war zones. Every morning, Bennett rose before dawn, dedicating 3 meticulous hours to preparing his uniform. Each pleat was folded with surgical precision, each strap aligned with mathematical exactitude. The bearskin cap, weighing nearly 2 pounds, was positioned with careful attention to the regulation 1 inch above his eyebrows. To casual observers, such dedication might seem excessive for what they perceived as mere ceremonial duty. But Bennett understood what tourists often failed to grasp. "It's not about standing still," he had explained to new recruits the previous week. "When we put on this uniform, we become living embodiments of tradition. Every button represents the honor of those who came before us. Every stance reflects the unwavering commitment to duty that has preserved these institutions through war, peace, and everything between." Now, as the midday sun reached its zenith, Bennett remained motionless at his post. Though his eyes focused on a fixed point in the distance, his awareness extended to everything within his periphery, a skill honed in dusty Iraqi streets where observation meant survival. He noticed the Japanese tour group respectfully maintaining their distance, the young British schoolchildren pointing with undisguised wonder, and the gathering of American tourists whose loud voices carried across the courtyard. Among them, one figure in particular caught his attention, though his expression revealed nothing. Ryan Miller adjusted the designer sunglasses perched on his carefully tousled hair, the Ray-Bans worth more than the rent he was currently behind on. At 24, he projected an image of carefree success that his bank account couldn't sustain. His Instagram aesthetic of luxury watches and exotic vacation spots masked mounting credit card debt and an apartment shared with 3 roommates. But none of that mattered if his latest planned TikTok series, Extreme London Pranks, delivered the viral moment he desperately needed. "This is going to be epic," Ryan assured his 3 friends, who doubled as his camera crew and echo chamber. "London Guard's Prank Challenge. Nobody's pushed it as far as I'm going to." He spoke with the practiced confidence of someone who had memorized too many motivational entrepreneur podcasts, his voice carrying the distinctive flat vowels of Southern California privilege. The morning had been disappointing by his metrics. Dancing beside stoic Buckingham Palace guards had earned some chuckles from tourists, but generated only modest engagement online. His attempt to startle the mounted horse guards with an air horn had been quickly shut down by attentive security. With each underwhelming video, Ryan's frustration mounted. His most recent content had been averaging only 50,000 views, a death knell for someone trying to monetize their online presence in an increasingly crowded marketplace. "My algorithm's tanking, guys," he had complained over overpriced pints at a pub near Westminster. "We need something extreme, something nobody's done before." The drinks had fueled his determination, blurring the line between creative content and desperate attention-seeking. These guards think they're untouchable with their fancy hats and rules, but nobody's untouchable in the content game. His friends, Jason, Derek, and Kyle, nodded in agreement, their own aspirations for influencer-adjacent fame tied to Ryan's success. Jason adjusted his DSLR camera, purchased on credit with the belief it would eventually pay for itself through sponsored content. Derek checked the battery on the stabilizing gimbal that represented his last paycheck from a job he'd quit to pursue content creation full-time. Kyle, the most recent addition to the crew, was still working his day job, but had called in sick to participate in what Ryan promised would be the most viral guard prank ever attempted. As they approached Bennett's post at the Tower of London, their strategy was already mapped out. 3 camera angles, carefully positioned to capture both the guard's reaction and the crowd's response. Ryan's expensive wireless microphone, another investment in his uncertain future, was discreetly clipped to his limited edition graphic t-shirt. "Remember, we need to build to it," Ryan instructed. "Start with the basic stuff, then escalate. The algorithm loves escalation." The performance began predictably enough. Ryan posed for selfies beside the motionless Bennett, making exaggerated faces for his first camera angle. "Yo, what's with the furry hat, my dude? Is it real bear? That's kind of messed up," he called out, voice pitched deliberately loud enough for tourists nearby to hear and turn their attention toward the developing spectacle. Bennett remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the middle distance, his mind reciting the oath he had taken years ago. In moments like these, he often thought of Sergeant Phillips, who had taught him the true meaning of discipline during basic training. "Discipline isn't about following orders," Phillips had barked. "It's about maintaining your standards even when no one is watching." Bennett had carried those words through dust storms and firefights, and they served him equally well against the minor irritations of tourist season. Ryan's antics grew more elaborate as a small crowd began to gather. He mimed examinations of Bennett's uniform, narrating for his audience both present and future. "The famous guards of London," he announced in his best documentary voice. "Legend says they're not allowed to move, smile, or show any human emotions. Today, we're going to test those legends." A middle-aged British woman clutched her handbag tighter, her disapproval evident in her tightly drawn lips. "Young man," she said, her accent crisp with authority, "show some respect." But her admonishment only fueled Ryan's performance, providing exactly the type of interaction his videos thrived on. "Respect?" Ryan replied, turning to play to his expanding audience. "For standing still like a mannequin? My followers respect authenticity, ma'am. We're just creating content here." The woman shook her head and moved away, unwilling to become part of his footage. A family with young children also retreated from the scene, the father murmuring something about Americans that wasn't quite audible but carried clear disapproval. Through it all, Bennett remained motionless, though his mind was active. 11 years of military service had taught him to observe, to assess, to prepare. He noted the shifting dynamics of the crowd, the concerned glance from a fellow guard stationed 50 yards away, the tourist who had slipped away, presumably to find security. He observed the slight tremor in Ryan's left hand despite his projected confidence, the sign of someone working himself up to something foolish. Ryan moved closer, emboldened by the growing attention and the lack of immediate consequences. "I don't think he's even human," he announced to his audience. "Maybe he's one of those AI robots they're making now." He waved his hand inches from Bennett's face, close enough that Bennett could detect the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the scent of nervous perspiration. A young girl in the crowd, no more than 7 or 8, tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, why is that man being so mean to the soldier?" The innocent question, clear and piercing in the summer air, caused several onlookers to shift uncomfortably. The father bent down, whispering what seemed to be a lesson about respect, then guided his daughter away from the scene with a disapproving backward glance. But Ryan either didn't notice or chose to ignore these subtle social signals, The combination of pre-pub liquid courage, the encouraging presence of his friends' cameras, and the desperate need for a career-saving viral moment had created a perfect storm of poor judgment. He turned to Derek, who was filming from the optimal angle, and asked, "Ready for the main event?" Derek nodded, adjusting his focus. "Battery full, memory card empty. Send it, bro." Ryan turned back to the crowd, which had grown larger as passers-by stopped to watch the unfolding drama. He raised his voice to its full theatrical projection, arms spread wide like a ringmaster commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to witness has never been attempted before in the history of social media." The practiced hyperbole rolled off his tongue with the ease of someone who trafficked in manufactured excitement. "The ultimate disrespect challenge." An uncomfortable murmur ran through the crowd. An elderly man with an RAF veteran pin on his jacket stepped forward slightly, his weathered face creased with concern. Nearby, a group of American tourists exchanged embarrassed glances, as if trying to distance themselves from their countrymen's inappropriate behavior. Bennett remained statue still, but his mind calculated distances and assessed the situation with military precision. The security officer was still 2 minutes away at current walking speed. His fellow guard had noticed the commotion, but was maintaining position as protocol demanded. The crowd had formed a loose semicircle, camera phones raised like a modern amphitheater. "Everyone always tries to make these guards laugh or move," Ryan continued, his performance now fully committed. "But nobody has ever done this." With dramatic flair, he dropped to one knee before Bennett, his designer jeans, purchased on credit, making contact with the ancient cobblestones. "The bootlick challenge begins now," Ryan announced, his voice carrying the forced enthusiasm of someone trying to convince himself as much as his audience that this was content worth creating. "Let's see if Mr. Stoic here can handle the ultimate disrespect." Bennett's mind flashed briefly to a night in Basra, pinned down by sniper fire for 6 hours with his unit, maintaining absolute stillness as the only defense against a trigger-happy marksman. That had been pressure. This was merely an inconvenience, though one that tested different reserves of patience. Ryan leaned forward in an exaggerated bow, his face approaching Bennett's immaculately polished boot. His tongue extended dramatically, close enough to the footwear to create the illusion for cameras without actual contact. It was all about the angle, the implication, the thumbnail that would surely drive clicks. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Several people gasped. A woman covered her children's eyes. Someone muttered, "Disgusting," just loud enough to be heard. Camera phones captured the moment from multiple angles, ensuring its digital immortality regardless of the outcome. But before Ryan's performance could reach its intended climax, a crisp, authoritative voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Guard, stand down." The command, delivered with quiet authority by Captain Woodridge, who had approached unnoticed during the escalating spectacle, changed everything. It was the ceremonial phrase that released a guard from their stance, a protocol rarely enacted outside of scheduled rotations or emergencies. The effect was immediate, and, to Ryan, utterly terrifying. Bennett, who had stood motionless as marble through every provocation, suddenly moved with mechanical precision. He pivoted 45 degrees toward his superior officer, came to attention, and executed a perfect salute. "Sir, permission to address the situation," Bennett requested, his voice steady and measured, carrying the weight of discipline that extended far beyond mere military training. "Permission granted, Guard Bennett," Captain Woodridge replied, stepping back slightly to yield the floor. Ryan, still kneeling in his performative pose, suddenly found himself frozen for entirely different reasons. The cameras were still rolling, but the script he had imagined for this content had just been shredded. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that he could only stare up at the guard who now looked directly at him for the first time. Bennett reached up with a white-gloved hand and slowly adjusted his bearskin cap, a deliberate, almost ceremonial movement. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had faced far worse than social media provocateurs. 11 years ago, I took an oath, he began, his words clear and measured. Not just to the crown, but to the principles of duty, honor, and respect that have guided this institution for centuries. The crowd was absolutely silent now. Even Ryan's friends had lowered their cameras slightly, captivated by the unexpected turn of events. While you were in that pub this morning, working up the courage for your performance, Bennett continued, his eyes locked on Ryan's increasingly uncomfortable face, I was standing at attention, honoring a tradition of service that stretches back hundreds of years. Ryan attempted to rise from his kneeling position, suddenly aware of how the imagery had changed. No longer a prankster in control, but a supplicant before authority. Bennett's next words froze him in place. This uniform isn't a costume, and this duty isn't a performance. Before I earned the right to stand guard here, I served 3 tours in Iraq. I've watched brothers in arms fall defending the very values you mock for the sake of fleeting internet fame. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Someone began to applaud but quickly stopped, sensing that this moment demanded respectful silence rather than approval. You see these boots you were about to demean yourself by touching? Bennett gestured slightly toward his footwear. The shine on them isn't for show. It's a reflection of the discipline and attention to detail that keeps soldiers alive on the battlefield. Every aspect of this uniform represents sacrifice you clearly cannot comprehend. Ryan's face had drained of its practiced confidence. The cameras that had been his protection now felt like judges, documenting a humiliation far different from the one he had planned to inflict. We stand here every day, Bennett continued, addressing not just Ryan but the entire gathered crowd, not as attractions or entertainment, but as living reminders of the dedication and sacrifice that built and preserve this nation. We endure the heat, the cold, the rain, and yes, even the occasional misguided individual who mistakes our discipline for weakness. Bennett's voice softened slightly, though it lost none of its power. You came here seeking what you call content, a moment of attention in an increasingly distracted world. I understand the desire to be seen, to be relevant, but true relevance isn't found in mockery or disrespect. It's built through character, through service to something greater than yourself. 2 uniformed security officers had arrived during Bennett's speech and now stood quietly at the edge of the scene, waiting for the natural conclusion before intervening. I don't expect an apology, Bennett said, his words carrying a note of finality. But I do hope that someday you'll understand what happened here. This isn't about you or me or your followers. It's about the principles that endure long after viral moments are forgotten. With that, Bennett turned back to Captain Woodridge, saluted once more with textbook precision, and returned to his position with the same disciplined movement that characterized his every action. Though he resumed his ceremonial stance, the atmosphere around him had fundamentally changed. The security officers stepped forward now, their duty clear, but their approach respectful of the moment that had just transpired. Sir, please come with us, one officer addressed Ryan, who had finally managed to stand, his designer jeans now dusty at the knees. Attempting to assault a Queen's Guard is a serious offense. I wasn't actually going to, Ryan stammered, but the evidence captured on multiple devices made his planned intentions clear enough. Your devices will need to be surrendered as evidence, the second officer informed Ryan's friends, who suddenly seemed far less enthusiastic about their role in the day's events. You can collect them after providing contact information at the security office. As the officers led Ryan away, his expensive sunglasses, perched atop his head throughout the confrontation, slipped and clattered to the cobblestones. In the moment's gravity, no one thought to pick them up. They lay there, a small monument to misplaced priorities, until a street cleaner would find them hours later. The videos, as inevitable in the digital age, spread across social media platforms with the speed of summer lightning. But unlike the thousands of guard prank videos that populated the internet, these clips told a different story. The hashtag #RespectTheGuard began trending within hours, with multiple angles of the incident generating millions of views. The comment sections filled with observations far different from what Ryan had anticipated. This is what real strength looks like, standing firm in your values even when provoked. That guard's speech should be required viewing in schools, dignity in the face of disrespect. Watch how he never raises his voice or loses his composure. That's true authority. Ryan's identity didn't remain private for long. Internet sleuths quickly connected the footage to his existing social media presence, and the court of public opinion rendered its verdict long before any legal proceedings could begin. His TikTok followers, rather than increasing as he'd hoped, plummeted as the backlash intensified. Brands that had been considering partnership deals quietly distanced themselves. But perhaps the most profound consequences weren't the pending legal charges or the public humiliation. They were the conversations happening in living rooms and classrooms as parents and teachers used the incident to discuss respect, duty, and the difference between attention and admiration. A group of elementary school students from Manchester, who had witnessed the incident during their field trip, sent hand-drawn cards to the Tower of London. One 10-year-old's message captured the sentiment perfectly. Dear Guard Bennett, thank you for teaching us that being strong doesn't mean being loud or mean. Sometimes the strongest thing is to be respectful even when others are not. Tourism officials reported a subtle but noticeable shift in visitor behavior at guard posts throughout London in the days following the incident. Tourists still took photos, still smiled and waved, but there was a new undercurrent of respect. Parents could be overheard explaining to their children not just what the guards did, but why they did it. The shallow jokes about making them laugh were increasingly replaced by genuine interest in the history and tradition they represented. Ryan's case moved efficiently through the legal system. The judge's remarks during his hearing would later be quoted extensively across social media. In attempting to humiliate Guard Bennett for momentary internet fame, you instead provided a powerful reminder of why the values he represents, duty, honor, respect, must be preserved and protected. The community service requirement attached to his suspended sentence placed Ryan in a veterans support center twice weekly for 6 months. Initially approached as merely a punishment to be endured, these hours spent among former servicemen and women would gradually transform his perspective in ways no viral moment could have accomplished. As for Guard Bennett, his viral moment found its way into training materials for military units and service organizations around the world. Not for his unwavering stance against provocation, but for his measured, dignified response when finally addressing it. It became a case study in how to maintain authority through character rather than force, how to correct without humiliating, how to stand firm without becoming rigid. Through it all, Bennett remained largely unchanged. The day after the incident, he resumed his post with the same dedication, the same precision, the same commitment to duty that had always guided him. The only difference was the added depth of respect in the eyes of those who now understood exactly what it meant to stand guard over not just historic buildings, but the principles they represented. 6 months later, as autumn leaves swirled around the tower grounds, Ryan Miller approached the visitor entrance, not with cameras or an entourage, but alone and with purpose. He had completed his community service the previous week and had come to deliver a letter, not of apology, for Bennett had never requested one, but of gratitude. The guard changed shifts 10 minutes ago, a kindly guide informed him upon hearing his request. But if you'd like to leave something, I can see it reaches him. Ryan handed over the envelope, its contents expressing what he had learned about respect, service, and the quiet dignity that endures long after trending topics fade. Whether Bennett would read it or not seemed suddenly less important than the writing of it, an acknowledgement of growth that no number of followers could measure. As Ryan turned to leave, he caught sight of a new group of tourists gathering around a guard, standing at attention exactly as Bennett had stood that summer day. Among them, a father knelt beside his young son, speaking quietly about respect and tradition. The guard remained motionless, but the legacy of Bennett's words continued to move through the world. What would you have done in Guard Bennett's position? Could you maintain such dignity in the face of disrespect? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And here's a question to ponder. When was the last time you witnessed true strength shown through restraint rather than reaction? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and share it with someone who appreciates stories of dignity and honor. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of tradition and respect, and hit that bell icon to never miss an upload. Remember, real strength isn't about breaking others down. It's about standing firm in your values even when others try to break you.